Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're navigating the ongoing complexities surrounding the Iran nuclear deal.
hmm
It's a really critical issue in international relations, obviously, with huge implications for global stability.
Absolutely. And we've seen a renewed burst of diplomatic activity recently, but alongside all the familiar tensions too.
Exactly. So, for you, the listener, if you're seeking a clear, efficient understanding of what's going on, well, that's what we're here for. We want to extract the core developments without getting bogged down.
Right. We've been looking at the latest reports, mainly drawing from Frost Press today to give you the essentials, the updates, potential future paths for these, very crucial negotiations.
Our mission, then, is to cut through the noise, deliver those key insights.
Let's do it.
All right, so let's jump into this recent flurry of diplomacy. A big development seems to be that meeting in Istanbul. Iran and the European powers, Britain, France, Germany, the E3.
Yeah, and their focus, it seems, was squarely on the nuclear negotiations involving Washington, the indirect talks, that is.
And what's striking is the timing, isn't it? Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, he'd warned just before about irreversible consequences.
Uh-huh. If the E3 decided to reimpose those UN sanctions, the ones lifted under the original 2015 deal. So, pretty strong language.
It really is. And it wasn't just talk. Iran's deputy foreign minister, Kazim Garibabadi, he posted on X, right, mentioning an exchange of views on the latest status of the indirect nuclear negotiations and the lifting of sanctions.
Yeah, which suggests, despite all the rhetoric and the underlying tensions, those communication channels are definitely still open. They're talking.
Seems so.
And Garibabadi also hinted at more meetings possibly, potentially involving not just the E3, but maybe China, Russia, and the U.S. down the line.
So a persistent diplomatic effort, even if it's indirect with the U.S.
Exactly. Trying to find some kind of resolution.
Okay, now let's bring in the United States. Former President Donald Trump, he's weighed in again. A new call for Iran to move quickly towards a deal. Sounds familiar.
It certainly does. And just for context, you'll remember the U.S. under Trump pulled out of that 2015 deal back in 2018.
Right, and reimposed sanctions.
And then about a year after that, Iran started rolling back its own commitments under the deal.
So fast forward to now. French press reported from Abu Dhabi that Trump said his administration had actually presented Iran with a proposal for a new agreement. After some recent talks, apparently.
He said they know they have to move quickly or something bad is going to happen. That's classic Trump rhetoric, really.
It is, but
Yeah.
it makes you wonder about these talks. There were those reports about Oman mediating between Iran and the U.S., weren't there?
Yes, supposedly the highest level contact since the U.S. withdrawal. But it's important, Araghchi specifically denied reports of a finished draft agreement.
Okay.
He said basically no concrete proposal had actually landed in Tehran.
So a bit murky then. Dialogue seems to be happening, maybe, but denial of real progress on a new deal.
Exactly. And adding another layer, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with European national security advisors also in Istanbul.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, discussing Iran alongside Ukraine. So that suggests some transatlantic coordination is happening.
That makes sense. They'd want to be on the same page, or try to be.
Definitely. And then you had Trump in Qatar saying the U.S. was getting close to a deal to avoid military action.
Which seems almost contradictory to the pressure tactics, doesn't it?
Well, it hints at maybe a desire to de-escalate, perhaps, even while keeping that hardline negotiating stance. It's complex.
It is, and it looks like his current approach is, well, more the same maximum pressure policy.
Yeah, the very policy that, contributed to where we are now.
But at the same time, he's talking up nuclear diplomacy, but also warning about military action if talks fail. It's that stick and carrot approach, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Right.
He offered an olive branch, as he put it, but with a deadline. And the threat of massive maximum pressure, potentially targeting Iran's oil exports down to zero if things collapse. Well, that really raises the stakes.
Hugely. Okay, let's shift focus to the European angle, the E3, and this snapback mechanism in the original deal.
Right. It sounds like Britain, France, and Germany are seriously considering triggering it.
Which would mean UN sanctions come back into force because they see Iran as not complying.
Exactly. But there's a time limit, right? That option expires in October.
So the clock is ticking on that potential leverage point.
It is. And it could lead to serious escalation. Iran has warned activating it risks provoking a global nuclear proliferation crisis that would primarily affect Europeans themselves.
That's a very direct warning to Europe.
Very direct, a stark warning about security implications for them.
Yet, despite that, Iraqi also told Le Point, the French magazine, that Tehran is ready to turn the page in its relations with Europe.
So maybe an opening there, a willingness to explore something new, perhaps?
It sounds like it. And then Garibabadi, after that Istanbul meeting, saying Iran and the 3 European countries are determined to sustain and make optimal use of diplomacy.
It really highlights this delicate balance, doesn't it? Existing tensions, but also this stated commitment to keep talking.
It's definitely a balancing act.
Yeah.
What about other players? China, for instance.
Well, China's position has been pretty consistent. They've always pushed for a political and diplomatic settlement.
Okay.
And they've publicly stated they value Iran's commitment to not develop nuclear weapons. So, their interest is clearly in preventing proliferation in the region, like most major powers.
Right. Okay, let's get into the actual status of Iran's nuclear program now. We know they're enriching uranium up to 60% purity. How significant is that?
It's very significant. The 2015 deal limited them to 3.67%. So 60 is a big leap. It's much closer to the roughly 90% needed for weapons-grade material.
But Iran insists it's for peaceful purposes.
They do. They maintain their right to enrich uranium for peaceful uses is non-negotiable. That's their firm stance.
But are there any signs of flexibility, maybe on levels or amounts, even temporarily?
There seem to be some hints, yes. An openness maybe to temporary restrictions, and that could be, a potential area for compromise in future talks. And Mohammad Islami, he's the head of Iran's Atomic Energy Agency. He's repeated that Tehran does not seek nuclear militarization.
And that enrichment is under UN supervision.
Yes, under IAEA supervision. But, and this is crucial, he also made it very clear that the dismantling of enrichment is not accepted by Iran.
That's a red line for them.
Absolutely. A critical red line in any discussion.
Okay, so let's try and summarize. We're seeing this really complex, dynamic situation. Diplomatic efforts are ongoing, mainly Iran and the E3, but the U.S. position is still this huge point of contention.
Right. And despite all the tension, the history, the rhetoric, multiple players are saying they want a diplomatic path. But that snapback deadline in October adds real pressure, a potential trigger point.
We see these differing perspectives, different strategic goals from everyone involved. Everyone has their red lines.
Exactly. The whole Iran nuclear issue is really at a critical point. And where it goes next depends on navigating all these incredibly complex dynamics. And for those of you perhaps preparing for civil services exams, thinking about international relations, international security, well, this is a perfect case study in the challenges of multilateral diplomacy.
Absolutely. For you, our listener, just understanding these nuances is key to grasping the complexities of global security and how diplomacy actually works, or sometimes doesn't. So, considering all these actors, their stated positions, what do you think are the most likely ways forward here? What factors are going to be decisive in the end?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is. No simple answers, but definitely something to think about. If you found this deep dive useful for understanding this major global issue, please do like, subscribe, and feel free to leave a comment with any other questions you might have.
And just to note, the primary source material for this deep dive came from reports by France Press.